Wonder if I'm actually live or not yet. Hey, welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Poikinen. I am here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California, where the flannel shirt is our state flag, the pit bull is our state bird, and cannabis is our state flower. Last night, there was a climate town hall on CNN, which I didn't watch. I'll be perfectly upfront about that. I didn't see a minute of it. Um, I'm really not into the idea of supporting an outlet like CNN1, but presidential candidates who are at best going to pay lip service to climate change. So I didn't see until this morning that the organization Sunrise Movement had been spending most of their night propping up Elizabeth Warren and I guess taking shots at Bernie Sanders. You guys know the horse race really isn't my thing, but finding out who is behind seemingly legitimate organizations that have a bad intent, yeah, man, that's where I'm at. So when I got up this morning and I started taking a lap around the tweeters, as you know, some of us do, I saw where there were people bitching about this. I decided to kind of poke around a little bit. Where did it go? There we are. It turns out that Sunrise Movement originally got a lot of their funding from the Rockefeller Family Fund and the Wallace, the Global Fund. If the Rockefeller family is involved, there's enough reason to believe automatically that the intent behind the organization is less than genuine. We've got members of and by the way, I think you might even be in the chat. Abort you. I think that was your account that tweeted out some of this. I want to get more into the substance of the Green New Deal maybe a little bit later, but I'll give you guys a couple of places to go to really read up on what the Green New Deal is all about. Back in February, I believe, Whitney Webb out of Mint Press News wrote an amazing article highlighting just how corporate sanitized and run through the establishment ringer the text of the Green New Deal as presented by Jeff Merkley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was. The original Green New Deal was co-written in part by Howie Hawkins, who is not my favorite Green by any stretch of the imagination. And I wouldn't look to this show to support Howie Hawkins as a presidential candidate. But as the author of the original Green New Deal, he did a fantastic job. Co-author. What Sunrise Movement did here was tip its hand. Sunrise Movement is an amalgamation of other environmental nonprofits. They build themselves as a left-leaning 501c4. They have members of the Working Families Party and 350.org wrapped up in their board. The Working Families Party is about as Orwellian as that sounds. What they do is go out of their way to create legislation that doesn't benefit working families. So I'm going to go into what's up with the OFF Act and the difference between the OFF Act and the Green New Deal. Before we do that, Uh, Sunrise Movement is the organization that staged a sit-in at Nancy Pelosi's office at the beginning of the first congressional year this year in 2018, and that was part of the protest that AOC joined to go have a sit-in at Nancy Pelosi's office before she cheered her on to become Speaker of the House, before she deferred to party leadership on Venezuela, before so many things that are just giant red flags about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. My screen here is running super slow, so if it looks like I'm stalling out a little bit, I'm accidentally looking at the chat here and not the chat here on my phone. Let's see. So I want you guys to independently on your own, and I will do this too, kind of see what we can't gather more on Sunrise Movement. I know that a lot of these environmental organizations start out with the best of intentions. In order to keep going, they need funding. In order to get funding, they seek grants or they seek donations from very large companies who may also have an agenda when it comes to how they want these organizations to be used on their behalf. And if you have controlling interest in an outlet like Sunrise Movement or Extinction Rebellion, you can drive policy without being front and center as, you know, let's say a member of the Rockefeller Family Fund, or in Extinction Rebellion's case, European billionaire capitalist centrists. Cory Morningstar, the Twitter account is at El Provocateur, and I talked about this on the show before, but she did a 6-part series called The Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent. And if I can't get a hold of the author, I'm going to put some serious study to that series of articles that I've read a couple of times now, but it's you don't get to absorb it all at once. And I'm going to do a series of shows on the manufacturing of Greta Thunberg, because I personally think it's disgusting to use children as the face of a movement that has nefarious intentions, or has an intent to control and an intent to drive policy that is going to benefit and line the pockets of a handful of people. And I've said this on the show before. I will keep saying it till it fucking sinks in. Green capitalism is not the answer to white supremacist capitalism. Black capitalism is not the answer to white supremacist capitalism. Only a dismantling of the capitalist system is the answer to capitalism. On the note of dismantling the system, Suzie Dawson finally received some good news coming out of her situation, her effort to apply for and receive asylum in Russia. She had her hearing this morning, and I'm going to read off her tweet about it. This is from like a couple hours ago, a little bit over 2 hours ago. Russia has accepted my application for asylum review. I have been issued a temporary certificate and may now legally reside in Moscow for 90 days while awaiting the outcome of review. To me, this is fantastic news. I know that you can't breathe a complete sigh of relief, but you can move on to the next phase of she can move on to the next phase of her asylum hearing with a little bit more if not confidence, then a sense of passing security. And for a targeted activist, that is something that you don't really get to experience very often. So I certainly hope that she's taken this as a win. I certainly hope that she's allowed herself to breathe for a moment, and that this win will help her focus on what needs to be done going forward. Um, so if you go to Suzie's Twitter, she sums it up better in about 2 minutes than I could in 10. But basically, um, through her work and through her activism and her reporting, she made herself a targeted individual to not just the New Zealand government, but also the rest of the Five Eyes countries, which are New Zealand and Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Um, it got to a point with the fear that she was living in, the stress that she was living in, and what was coming her way if she stuck around New Zealand, that she fled the country. So she's been seeking asylum in Moscow, and she has now been granted a temporary, I forget the phraseology exactly, but temporary asylum while she waits to see if she can get granted permanent asylum. So, okay, the New World Order folks look at extreme consolidation of power and energy in the hands of the few. That's never good. No, but what it is patternistic, and every time that there's an economic collapse, every time there's a recession, every time even monopolies get broken up, what that does is further consolidates the power base and the wealth base. Andrew Smith, my co-host on the Action for Assange Vigils, and our conversation about whether or not the U.S. was becoming Stalinistic or was Stalinistic in terms of the way that we operate through control of media industry and censorship. When we had that conversation, I brought up inverted totalitarianism. Which I think is what we are under, because with inverted totalitarianism, you don't have politics that create or drive the economy. You have an economy that creates or drives politics, and that economy is manipulated by a handful of people, a relatively small number of people, especially in terms of there's 7 billion of us on the planet. That is when the power and the wealth consolidates further, I mean, obviously, by the nature of what's taking place, it strengthens the position of the people who are executing the totalitarianism. But unless you have constant division and constant distraction and constant confusion, it allows a space to activate and unite all of the people who are not in control over their own agency, over the agency of their communities or their states or their countries. We have a unique opportunity right now, especially with the disillusion of organizations that purport themselves to be good, noble, and well-intended, like Sunrise Movement or Extinction Rebellion, or for that matter, the Democratic Party or progressives or Justice Democrats or Social Democrats or Democratic Socialists. We can either sit isolated behind computers and argue with one another on Twitter or on Facebook whether or not social democracy or democratic socialism or centrism or fucking far right fascism is the best ism to handle the situation that we're currently in, or we can hang out together in kind of a decentralized way and create a situation where people become the driving force to shattering all isms. The Stasi would come in their pants to have our level of surveillance. That's true, but what the Stasi had was a snitch network that took us to the development of the Nextdoor app before America got the snitch network as good as the Stasi, or maybe Yelp. I think maybe Yelp was really the start of the neighborhood snitch brigade online. I found many issues we can join on as I've watched Trump sites last week and learned half of what they discussed was the same as us: corporate rule, pedo rings, and corruption. So yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not. And we talk about this on the Free Assange vigils too. Like there's commonality in with a great deal of us. What we have to do and what I'm trying to do through this show is to point out that the division and distraction and the confusion that's manufactured is done so that we don't communicate, so that we don't figure out that, oh yeah, we're actually concerned about a lot of the same things. Now at this point, my friend Jason Carney would be like, yo dude, if he's a fascist, I'm gonna punch a fascist, and that's just what it is. And I don't think that average everyday Americans are as fascistic as we want to make them out to be based on who they voted for. That may be out of the realm of absorption for some people, but like, fuck it, that's just how it is. The average Trump supporter who sat through a lifetime of neoliberal failures and a lifetime of GOP failures, when faced with the option of 4 to 8 years of owning the libs or 4 to 8 years of the exact same neoliberal failures that they're bitching about in the first place, probably went ahead and voted for Trump, in spite of the fact that he's such a reprehensible, walking, barely human flesh bag. And not because of it. I know a lot of people in this country are casual racists, and most of them own pussy hats. But in terms of active, outright racists or fascists or fucking militant right wingers, I think those numbers aren't as big as our media wants us to think they are. So here's the thing about taking down pedophile rings. And Whitney Webb's reporting has borne this out. Elizabeth Voss's reporting has borne this out. We've talked about it. Like, rarely do these people face consequences when when we learn that they're up to this. Like, if one of them gets arrested, they Epstein out. Or we hold up the one person that ran a ring of child rape trafficking, and the one person that we managed to arrest, we're like, okay, that's done. Case closed, story over. The hats are fucking ridiculous, Karen. They really are. But yeah, if you want to stop systemic international pedophilia among the elite, you've got to take away their centers of power. You've got to take away their access to that power. You've got to take away the machinations that allow them to succeed and thrive in this environment. And that's a hard question, or that's a hard conversation to have with people on the right who may agree with, we've got to get rid of child sex trafficking rings, we've got to get rid of money in politics, we've got to get rid of, globalists or Zionists or whatever word that we understand with nuance that right wingers take to mean Jews. Oh, Q is absolutely BS. So Q is the same bullshit psyop that Anonymous has become. Q is there, as Elizabeth Voss calls it, to be hope porn, to keep people sedentary. Trust the plan, wait and see, past predicts future, all that kind of bullshit nonsense words that they use to get people to stay on the sidelines. And the people that would become active or were already activated or were leaning towards becoming a full-on anonymous style hacktivist are either gathered up and put back to work for the NSA or the CIA, or they're sent down multiple rabbit holes that all lead them to argue the exact same position that the neoliberals are arguing too. If you follow Q long enough, they're all for the destabilization of Latin America. They're all for war in Iran. They're all for war, more empire, more conquering, more income inequality. It's in my opinion, what Anonymous has become, what maybe it was the entire time, was a division of the CIA. Q is a division of the NSA, and it's their mirror psyops in order to keep an activist community at bay. I think about this a lot when I bring up Suzie Dawson's Freeing Julian Assange, the third part where she gives the activist field guide and the first person testimonial of what it's like to be a targeted individual. When you're being told that this thing is good and pure and right and righteous, and then all of a sudden you see them flip on a dime to encourage sanctions or encourage intelligence communities destabilizing a country, or the fucking absolute standing up for CIA agent William Barr, or fucking CIA lapdog Elliot Abrams. When you see that happen and there's obvious gaslighting going on and it just doesn't fit, go ahead and assume that the person that is doing that to you is acting in bad faith. And disengage from that person or that organization. Okay, so how about a deep state power struggle? When Cynthia McKinney was on the show, she had a really good talk about, we had a really good talk. She had a really good theory about the evolution of the CIA from the original Dulles Cowboys to the more like Ziocons that as she calls them, that they are now. And I mean, of course, there's going to be intrapersonal power struggles, but I think the overall hegemony of the U.S. and more importantly, the shadow control that unelected permanent state in D.C. has, that supersedes any personality conflicts or internal struggles that may be going on. I don't think that there's a separate faction per se of the deep state, unless they're like purely anti-evangelical. and really don't want to play into the Christian dominionist and Zionist rapture ready end times theory that seems to be driving so much of the Q narrative. I care more about these Christians than Trump does. I fear we can join them when they see we have their interests in mind as well. So this is when it's and maybe I should just talk about this for a little bit. I'll rewatch it and do a show on it. But the family documentary on Netflix. The reason that Donald Trump polls so high with evangelicals is because they've had 60 or 70 years of marketing that says elected officials, leaders are handpicked by God, and it is our duty as God's servants to protect and uphold and do whatever we can to make these leaders succeed, regardless of what their personality is or how they may view anything in the Bible. They were hand selected by God to lead. So it is the duty of good little Christians everywhere to make sure that they stay successful. And that's fundamentally the premise of what the family does. This is the organization that has hosted the National Prayer Breakfast since Eisenhower. And it started out as a group of business owners in Seattle who wanted to stamp out the labor movement for good. And they so successfully tied religion and business ownership and capitalism to each other that the left, as it were, and the labor movement was all but completely driven out of Seattle for the better part of a century. Yeah, so Q folks see Catholic Church, meek Wicca folk, and anyone else not their brand of Christian as on Satan's side. Yes, because Q is a disingenuous psyop. And the people who have been pulled into the Q crew, as it were, are people who want and need to be led, I guess is what I'm getting at here. There's authoritarianism appeals to about a quarter of this population, and some people need to be led, need to be told what to do, have to follow. So because there's that predilection within themselves to follow and to be led, they automatically seek out leaders. There's a hole in them being complete, and the authoritarian fills that hole with structure, with dogma, however many different brands of ideology there are under the sun. If that ideology falls along the authoritarian axis, there's going to be an audience for it. There's going to be people who are receptive to that. And what Q does, not only is brainwash people, but it creates acolytes. It creates evangelists. One of the biggest Q channels is called the Praying Medic, for fuck's sake. That is tying church and state together intrinsically. And the fact that these are Constitution thumping, quote unquote, Constitution thumping patriots who have so successfully married church and state without even realizing it, or if realizing it, having no problem with it, should tell you everything you need to know about the authenticity of that organization. My husband was a Mason, but the good kind. What's the bad kind? The fucking almost Illuminati kind? I'm not that kind of a Mason. I know my way around a trowel, and I know my way around a tub full of concrete or mortar mix. But I don't know the secret handshakes. Um, First Baptist, going to church 3 times a week. I was raised in the Church of God in Anderson University, and Anderson, Indiana. There's 2 different kinds of Church of God, and one is like the more like Pentecostal style that I had, and then the other is the snake handling kind. And when I was old enough to read about this, I got kind of pissed off that we weren't involved in the snake handling kind, because man, who doesn't want to see their preacher get bit by a rattler, you know? The Church of God has a tent revival style thing every year called camp meeting, where evangelicals from all over the planet descend upon this smallish Midwest town and hang out for like a week. And it's nonstop religious services all over this Church of God college in the town. And it is excessive and borderline decadent and super Christy and super weird and uncomfortable. And yeah, I had to be a part of that for the majority of my childhood, up until the point to where my parents found out that the only reason that we were going to camp meeting is so we could pick up chicks and have sex with them in a car, because taking them to a motel was not something we had ID for, and taking them to our house was not something we were allowed to do. So after that happened, I got a pass on having to show up for camp meeting. That was about it. You were a hod carrier for 13 years. Congratulations. Like, union or not? I don't know. There's a lot of people that got into masonry with no union protection whatsoever. I have been rambling for quite a bit. I really wanted to touch on the inauthenticity of Sunrise Movement. I do think that it's an important thing to look at. I think that anyone who's trying to shape or drive climate policy or green policy, I don't have a lot of faith in any of them. I don't know how much faith I have in the actual Green Party to come up with sound environmental policy at this point. They wrote the Green New Deal as it originally almost a decade ago. And the furthest it got was co-opted by Jeff Merkley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I did not plant the seed of Christ, as far as I know. I don't even think we get Buddhas anymore, because apparently the Dalai Lama is going to retire, and that's just it. I would highly recommend, and when I go back and I do the description for this video, I will link Whitney Webb's February article out of Mint Press about the corporatization of the Green New Deal. I will also link the manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for consent in the description, and that is something that over the next couple of weeks I'm going to get into more and more. Also, I'm going to hopefully be able to run OBS software and conduct live interviews during a live stream from this exact spot. I have some shit that I need to learn and figure out real quick, but hopefully the show will be getting a little bit more stylish and quote unquote professional. Which brings me to I have a Patreon, and I hate asking people for support or help, but if you support independent media already, please consider adding this channel to the list of content creators that you support. If you do not want to support the show through Patreon, you're looking for a different way to do that, please email me at slownewsdaypodcast@gmail.com, and we will figure something out. I will be back hopefully a couple of more times before 3 o'clock Pacific today, and then I got to go to work. But until then, I'm Steve Poikinen. This has been Slow News Day, and good luck to us all. I love it when it yells at me. Ma. Oh, for fuck's sake.